Welcome to the Build Business Acumen podcast, where we deliver practical knowledge and powerful guidance. Here is your futuristic host, Nathaniel Schooler.
Oh, I'm really excited today to have one of my old clients, actually, Eddie McAtominey, with me. I hope I got that right.
McAtominey.
McAtominey. I think it's super cool anyway, man.
That's a great Irish name, yeah.
Main thing is you got your first name right, yeah?
Yeah, that's true.
I've known you for a long time, and it's got to be about 8 years now, I would think.
Yeah.
And you working with you was so educational. Like in the first part of my kind of marketing, it's when I first moved into marketing, and you probably didn't realize it at the time, and I didn't realize it at the time. But like what I actually learned hanging out with you and the other guys, it was really valuable. The knowledge that I picked up just from sort of listening in the office and stuff like that. And I think I'm just really excited to hear about what you're working on nowadays and this kind of stuff. So you're mainly a creative director, right?
Yeah. So my background effectively started off in retail design. So I started off at Fitch, which is part of WPP now, although it wasn't then. And I suppose over the years I've chopped and changed. So, for periods of my life, I was very well known for designing bars and restaurants. And I've still got one standing, Ed's Easy Diner, which wasn't called after me, but is still actually around. But, a lot of it's obviously chops and changes as retail chops and change. So as I say, started off in very much retail design. Ended up quite young with my own businesses. So typically then you're getting involved not just in your particular skill set. And my skill set was environment, I suppose. I did product design at university and ended up, I suppose, a retail designer in terms of designing stores. But as you develop a business, you end up employing other types of designers. So going from 3D, you're employing 2D graphic designers. As things change, you're ultimately employing digital designers. It goes off and you're employing architects. So you end up with a team of people. But I suppose my responsibility over the years has been to deliver the outcomes. So typically in retail terms, the outcomes are a shop or store, print and promotional items, digital website, mobile app, that type of thing. I suppose anything that engages customers to effectively purchase a product. But I suppose, alongside that, you have to know a little bit about a lot of things. So everything from space planning and how people actually shop, the physical ergonomics of shopping and the psychology of shopping. So where you place products on a shelf and how you place them, and effectively, there's this, I suppose, information, data available in terms of how people actually purchase. So premium products are put in certain locations at eye level and the like, and you can actually create how people actually physically shop a store and customer flows and the like. So there's a bit of science behind it. Notwithstanding, you still have to know a bit about air conditioning and materials in terms of wear and tear and how to not use necessarily the most expensive thing, because typically stores are done for 3 to 5 years and then they're stripped out. So there's a lot of things you need to know. I suppose in recent years, I have done a lot of identities for places. Started off effectively being given the project by Network Rail in London, and then it's gone on to various other place identities for Network Rail in Manchester, Salford, Leeds, various other places in the UK. And fairly recently, I did an identity work with as part of the team, but effectively was creative lead on Leek Street Arches, which are the graffiti arches underneath Waterloo, which is a bit of an oddity because it's not a specific identity. It's working with artists who are going to be layering up paint. So you can't just put a sign up and expect it to look like a sign. So we had to think slightly differently to actually, I suppose, approach that from the point of view of creating an identity that was going to last, because obviously it's going to be painted over. So it was a lot about thinking through what an identity is about. And obviously some of the identity at Leek Street is the graffiti and the art, but what we're trying to do is utilize the space to actually engage with other businesses who could identify with that and actually use the people coming through to actually give them a bigger experience in terms of food and drink, and something which creates something where you go there all day and it's still underlined by the actual art and the fact there's graffiti art there, and possibly you can actually do something yourself. So we came up with this idea of an identity based on a strapline, leave your mark, and that being an invite to anyone to come and leave their mark. So not the specific guys who have been going there for years, any member of the public can come in and leave a mark, which was quite a nice sort of engaging. Anyway, that's now open and finished and doing very well. I think the reason I wanted to chat today was more about what's actually happening with retail, and specifically what's happening with the high street. Obviously things have changed. I mean, there's lots of things happening at the moment in terms of the economy and the fact that things are being cut, and there's obviously a shift online in terms of purchasing. There's obviously changing tastes as millennials have come through and Generation Y has become X, and X has become people don't shop in the same way as I did, or even you, who's slightly younger than me. So therefore, the high street, we've seen lots of very large retailers, starting with Toys R Us, who I suppose more edge of town, but a lot of them, Maitland, various retailers going under. The last one being obviously that you read about, Evans, the cycle store, going under ostensibly. But
I actually didn't read about that, but I literally just bought a bicycle the other day, and it's such a shame that went out of business, because that is a particular area that could have been so simple to keep alive. Yeah. And actually, I see massive opportunities within mobile bicycle servicing, mobile puncture repair, and the problem with all these things, right, is that they don't adapt fast enough. They don't listen to what the customer wants, right? And change. I mean, look at Blockbuster and how that died, right? And what happened? Like, Netflix came along, they posted the DVDs, didn't they, to start with, and then they came in and killed it. And Evans, I'd be very interested in your reasons why that's gone out of business.
Well, Evans, being fair, hasn't actually gone bust. It was ostensibly going bust, and Mike Ashley, Sports Direct, has agreed to take an amount of it, and he's going to offload a certain amount of stores, which I understand is about 50% of the stores, and retain them out. I think there's quite a few reasons for it. I mean, obviously we've got this economy that's effectively undergoing this austerity, so you've got pressure on local authorities to generate income, so whether that's rates or parking restrictions. You've got retailers who've signed up for leases, 25-year leases in a lot of cases, so their rent is only going to go up, and if they signed the lease 5 years ago, which they could quite easily have doing, they've got 20 years of an agreement. So again, you've got businesses, the only way they can get out of these agreements to pay rent is to effectively liquidate themselves in some way, shape or form. And that doesn't take into account the changing market, the fact that people, certainly younger people, are not shopping in the same way, and that they're using stores really just to benchmark in terms of pricing to then buy online because they can get it cheaper. So they're going to perhaps touch and feel the product and see what suits them or whatever. And then obviously you've got the rise of online retailing. So you've got companies like ASOS, who, I remember when clothing retailing was first muted in terms of going online, and people said, well, people aren't going to buy clothes unless they can touch and feel them. But you've got someone like ASOS, who's probably one of the most successful fashion retailers, certainly in Europe, have a fabulous reputation as a business in terms of their whole engagement with staff and the way they present themselves, and the fact that they are state of the art in terms of that market. And then you've got Topshop. You've got Topshop competing with ASOS now, and obviously probably they're not going to compete because they've got however many 100 stores across the UK where they've got up to 25-year leases paying huge rents. and they're under pressure from rates from the local authorities and people not being able to park and people not shopping and just going in to compare prices and product. So there's lots of reasons. And the other thing is obviously the whole expansion of retail. So retail was going along at a pace with retailers funding through profit. And then all of a sudden you get the money markets moving in. So you get the likes of hedge funds and funds buying into retail, giving them X amount of millions of pounds. And this is not just retail in stores, this is restaurants. And the reason you've seen restaurants going under, all of a sudden they expand beyond the size of the market capacity. And the whole push is to get more open because they're making money. So typically it's this sort of pyramid and domino effect as it starts to fail. So the market starts to drop off. Every store's paying high levels of rent. Not all the stores start to take money as the market drops off. So all of a sudden you're left in this position where you've got gaps like rotten teeth on the high streets. And what's going to happen? Because the high street for me is essential in terms of creating communities. One of the things that I do find slightly disturbing about the whole online thing is this lack of engagement between people. That the people start to believe that things appearing on social media are real, and people's lifestyles posted on Instagram or Facebook are actually real. They're not. They're little tiny fragments of their life, and no one's going to post that day they were miserable on a Tuesday evening.
Well, they're not, are they? No.
Yeah, so therefore, everything's polarized in terms of the view. And I think things like having reasons to go out and to effectively be part of a community and to socialize are fundamental to keeping a society going. And I think the high street's core in terms of providing that. Where I live, funnily enough, where I live was voted the most healthy high street in London. A couple of days ago, there's a poll, and as it happens, I live in Muswell Hill, and there was a poll conducted, and I'm not sure who it was by. It was one of the retail organisations about the most healthy high streets in London and obviously the UK. And typically, the correlations were very much around money. So typically, the least healthy high streets were in areas where people don't have a lot of money, and obviously Muswell, to a degree, where I live, is a very middle class high street, which effectively attracts middle class brands, I suppose. And you've got a huge Planet Organic and this, that, and the other. But generally, your sort of chicken and fast food outlets tend to go to cheaper high streets, or where there's slightly more, I suppose, poverty. But I think it's essential anyway, at whatever level, you've got to create this heart in communities, because if everyone eventually stays at home on social media as people get older, I mean, there isn't this sort of sense of creating society. So, I think, there's obviously a lot being talked about in terms of what can be done. So obviously it requires people to sort of step backwards to a degree. So landlords to effectively look at things differently. But, would you rather have someone saying, I'll pay half the rent for the next 10 years, or I'm going to put the business into liquidation and you're going to have an empty shop? And you're not going to have people queuing to actually, fill that store now or that restaurant. So this idea that looking at other ways of using the high street, I mean, there's talk of trying to create communities by trying to get more residential in the high street. I mean, there's definitely been a movement in the bigger cities of the UK where more younger people are moving city central. You had this sort of thing where for a period of time, as your career expanded, you lived in the city for a while, then as soon as you could, you moved further and further out because that's where the suburbs were and that's where success lied. I think now there's this idea that you have this sort of lifestyle where work's becoming more focused around where you live. Not sure necessarily it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing short term insofar as I can see it between the ages of 20 and 30 that you're thinking, right, okay, I'm going to do the co-living where I work with my friends, and then after work I socialize with them, and then all I need is a tiny little space to go and put my head down, and then I wake up the next morning, work and social, and you start to get to 30 and people start coupling up, and the first child comes along, and all of a sudden, shit, do you really want to be in this 24/7 social place? And also, no one's thought we need to build a school around here somewhere, or we need to, so there's things that, but the high street's interesting because I think this idea of regeneration by creating more mixed use in terms of interspersing retail with living, with other forms of leisure. So, interesting. I mean, in the West End of London, which is where I am now, I mean, there's things like golf courses have opened up, Crazy Golf's opened up on the third floor of various places. I mean, a lot of retailers are experimenting in terms of John Lewis have got a store where you can go and sleep in the store the night, try out the beds. I mean, but I think that's what it's about. I think it's about sort of trying to find reasons that actually create this sort of social sort of community, so you don't lose the whole fabric. I mean, I always found it really frustrating, and you could see it when they closed. Post offices were closing left, right and centre, and for me the post office was somewhere to go and bloody queue forever to post a letter or a package. But for a lot of people, predominantly older people, it's somewhere to go where they actually can talk to someone. And I think this, you're finding, I mean, I'm seeing more and more reports in terms of young people being extremely lonely. So they might have online friends, but the fact is, it's creating this sort of very polarized oneness where people are sitting. I mean, even you go on the WeWorks, I find it fascinating that all these little businesses making money. I mean, are they really making money, or all these young guys in there really got parents who are saying, "Tell you what, Johnny, go and get a desk in WeWork and we'll fund you." Because certainly I couldn't have came down from Newcastle to London on the back of setting up my own business and sitting in a WeWork. So I'm probably being slightly cynical, but you do tend to find, I'm not sure these co-working spaces actually facilitate for the level of networking that it's assumed people do. I think a lot of what I see, and I use them fairly regularly, it's people sitting at a laptop with headphones in all day, and and there's very little, I think, cross-fertilization. And obviously in WeWorks you get people who are taking physical office spaces, and there's groups of people. But a lot of the, I think, hot desking type workers, I don't, there's things that supposedly engage them, but I don't really see people being that engaged. And I think high streets have a big part to play in that.
With the high street and social media the way it is, there needs to be some more exciting things going on, first of all, in the high street, which is exactly what you're saying, right? But actually, we need to work out ways to bring the people from social media into that high street, but also get the people who are in the high street to share that experience with the people on social media, because that's the way we're going to actually get the two to pull together. And that's the major problem. Obviously, people walking around on their phones like this, I mean, we know that, and that's a massive problem, isn't it? But I think it's just society in general has changed. I mean, like, I remember when I grew up, we had the telephone, you stuck your finger in the wheel, and you had 3 channels on the TV. You probably had 2, right?
Yeah.
Or one.
I think I certainly remember, 2 probably,
Yeah. And now the major issue is there's so much information. There's actually ridiculous amounts of information about everything. That's why I'm doing this interview with you, because I know that what you've got to say is valuable and people need to hear it. So even if I share this with 10 or 20 people who are in retail, and it gets them thinking about how they're going to actually save their business, right? Then that's great, But it's almost like you need a sign. You need a sign that just says, this way, experience this way, or you need a display, or you need something that's actually really creative, really engaging, that like the bed idea with John Lewis, yeah, that's a fantastic idea. Can you just imagine if they set up like some really good social media displays where, you know, you could pretend you've got a butler or something? I mean, there could be all sorts of creative ideas, couldn't they, that could merge that?
I agree. I mean, I read a lot about, you know, things being Instagrammable. You know, so the reason people aren't going to certain restaurants, they're not Instagrammable. So, you know, whether that's Prezzo or whatever it is, the ones that have gone under. But I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure that that's right. I mean, I think it's interesting. I went to, you know, I live, like I say, North London. I went to, we got to quite a lot of do's at Ali Pali. You know, it's literally
Right, of course.
It's walking distance.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, the firework do this weekend, and they have effectively a street food market afterwards, and then a disco, you know, music playing, DJs, whatever. And I always find when I go to these sort of things, and I've been to probably 3 or 4 this year, it's a complete cross section. Yeah, so it's from, you know, both my daughters, one's, you know, 21, one's 23, and their boyfriends were part of our group, but it was full of mixed, you know, so there was people in their 50s and 60s, and there was also people in their 20s, and the DJs, you know, and it was just great because people were actually interacting with each other. And all right, you know, you had an amount of people probably spending the whole evening with their phone. And I find it fascinating. You go to a firework display, and you look up, and no one's looking at the fireworks. They're all looking at the phones of the fireworks. So it's almost like, ignore the experience in terms of what's happening now. I'll come back and look at it later. And I see that all over. You know, that people sort of, instead of actually, I think what you need in terms of creating experience on the high street is things that get people in the moment, interacting with people. Fine, if they want to do the old selfie or Instagram shot to post, but don't make that the reason they're going there, because how long does it take? And this is what gets me with a lot of what's being said. How long does it take to take a few shots in a restaurant to show you've been there? Instant, and then you're gone. I was in Indonesia last year, and lots of wealthy Chinese. This was Bali. Lots of wealthy Chinese, and we backpack, so it's, you know, it's not particularly expensive, but we have a few 2 or 3 days in quite expensive places, and we're in this quite expensive, one of our expensive places rather than our backpacking places. And I was sitting on my own beside the sea in this quite, you know, plush cafe, just having a beer, watching the sea. And some Chinese young guy, probably 21, 22, very wealthy looking, in terms of he had all the right designer gear, nicely pressed and stuff, came and he sat down at a big table, like the table I'm sitting at here. And the food started arriving. And eventually the entire table was full of food. And the Indonesian young girls who were serving them, I could hear them sort of laughing behind. Anyway, started taking photographs of the food. And I was thinking, someone's going to join this. And I was thinking, I sat there for half an hour and an hour. Still no one came to join them. And he'd ordered the entire, from what I could see, menu to actually post it on social media. And, you know, one, it's a bloody criminal waste, because I didn't see him eat anything. Wow. But two, it's this sort of sense of, you know, if I was ordering that food, I'd be ordering the food to experience the food, not to experience the photograph of the food.
Yeah.
And I think that whole reality is what the high street can actually start to push in. So it's, you know, so start to bring in this idea of mixing it up a bit and creating reasons to actually go there and for people to actually interact. And I think that's why things like the golfs and the table tennises and the like you're seeing around the West End now are actually working, because they actually create, you know, it's very Instagrammable and very postable, but they actually create some interaction between people. Yeah, you don't necessarily get, you do get, I mean, obviously, I'm in an age where I go up the Dog and Duck on Frith Street now, have a pint with a few mates, and we interact. But, I mean, in actual fact, I went to the Coach and Horses a week ago, and I've posted my picture with my mate of the Coach and Horses on Instagram. But it's quite rare to do that, because if I did, I'd have 1,000 photographs of,
Yeah. Well,
the coach horses, because it's not something that's unique. It was just, I haven't seen this particular guy for ages. But my point is to just use the extraordinary as a social media moment and not use it as a social community engagement, I think is something that the high street could actually push back at people, and start to add some fabric back into society. And I think that's the real opportunity, as the space is opening up and hopefully rents are reducing and local authorities start to look at how they can reduce the rates. Or else you're going to end up with high streets that are full of betting shops, nail bars, people who can afford to actually be in, be out, and they're not really adding anything back in terms of creating this thing that everyone could actually use. And I think it's more than it's more than just entertaining young people for social media purposes.
Right.
A lot of things have disappeared that were there, and that used to bind people together. So whether it was youth clubs. Pubs are disappearing for the same reasons. £5 a pint. I mean, people can't go and have a £5 pint 5 days a week now.
No.
And I'm not suggesting they should, but they're places where people engage with each other. And I think that's the big danger, that things that are the points and the places where people engage are what is being actually eroded.
But is that it? I've been thinking a lot about this recently, and it's a lot of this is to do with actually not embracing the generations that are coming along. So like the young people, the newborns, and as they grow older, they're going to be creating artwork, and they're going to be creating things that they could actually engage the local community. And if they actually just give an example, right? If there's like a restaurant, that says, right, okay, every month we're going to run a competition for this school, right? This month, they pick a different school each month, and they run an art competition. And then at the end of the year, then they have a competition where all the winners from each month, for example, are put against each other, and then they vote, and then there's a prize for that particular person and their family, for example, right? And these opportunities to engage are being missed, because on the whole, the way I see it is there are the big chains, who couldn't care, right? Mostly, all right. Obviously, you've got exceptions with Waitrose and stuff, but they are too slow to move, and you've got the smaller kind of businesses, but they can't really afford to spend loads of time doing this because they don't have a lot of money or time, in fact, because they're busy with inside the business, So it's like, I'm just a bit sort of, I'm not going to sound bored, because I actually went into Chichester. I live in Chichester now. I just moved from Devon, and it is a middle class city. It's absolutely beautiful. We've got a cathedral, and I saw some amazing signage. I went past, there was one sign. It was like bacon butty and a cup of tea for £2.95. Not that I'm going to buy a bacon butty and a cup of tea, but but it was a beautiful bicycle. It had a beautiful sign. It was a vintage bike. It was really clean. And these opportunities to actually engage and remind people that you exist are being missed. And I mean, I've studied this for years, because when I came from retail, right? So I was in drinks retail, like back in the day, like when my dad used to run a winery, and we went to loads of shows, and so I and then I worked in wine merchants and stuff. So I kind of get retail. I love retail. I think it's hugely exciting, but there are people that are just like, oh, well, who cares, kind of an attitude. And it's like, well, actually, my dad worked out that every new signpost that he bought on the main road, I mean, he spent a lot of money on signs, £30,000 a sign they were, for a single-sided sign on the main road. But each one would add 5% onto the shop sales. So there was a direct correlation between that signage out there on the main road and the shop sales for brand awareness.
I get what you're saying, but I mean, if you think that Amazon is the new Walmart in reality. I mean, so Amazon are effectively a delivery company, but they're starting to. I mean, I have found it quite amazing because you can see the same thing with Deliveroo. You know, Deliveroo are developing black kitchens. So black kitchens being kitchens where food's made. So they, so what they're doing is they're buying in. So Deliveroo will deliver for any brand. So you can get Carluccio's from Deliveroo or whichever brand you want from Deliveroo, McDonald's. But ultimately, the touch point with the customer is Deliveroo if they're going down that route. So it enables Deliveroo or Amazon to ultimately dictate the terms of the sale and what they're actually selling. So ultimately, if Deliveroo open black kitchens producing a McDonald's equivalent, all of a sudden McDonald's out the frame. And you can see Amazon are doing exactly the same. You know, that they're effectively creating their own labels, and ultimately, it's this sort of distance between the consumer and brand. So if you went to Walmart to buy Fairy Liquid is now 2 steps away from you. Because if you go, and I'm not sure this exists, but if you say went through Amazon to get to Walmart to get the Fairy Liquid, the customer, the opportunity is for Amazon to develop its Fairy Liquid. And all of a sudden, that's, so but there's problems with that, isn't there? There's problem. You can see that ultimately, technically, brands are potentially going to become more and more watered down as the consumer touch point gets further and further away. So, and I can see that the way things are going, that could apply to any brand. So brands that are huge at the moment, I don't know, Nike, for instance.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, Amazon people start saying, right, okay, I don't want to go to the Nike store. I don't want the Nike experience anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to order my Nikes through Amazon. And you can. And all of a sudden, Nike starts saying, right, okay, well, we'll offer the experience of Nike, and then we'll offer some Nikes or equivalents. I don't know how that plays out. What I do think the high street's able to do, though, is offer something where there's just a space where people go. So whether that's how you actually define that, so whether it's go to listen to music or socialize or, but it's got to be about interaction of people rather than anything to do with brands or necessarily anything to do with social media, other than the social media opportunities that come out by people socializing and communities being formed.
Yeah.
And I appreciate this whole thing about socialization and communities. Brands love it because brands want to be people. That's the whole point, isn't it? You develop an identity. All of a sudden, you've got a personality as part of your identity. And that's what brands love to be, isn't it? What is the personality of our brand? It's you look at some forms of strategy for brands and you do get these alignments with characters, so you've got companies who use character sets, which are usually from psychology, to do brand definition. So it's not a brand, it's a nice little smiley person who you're talking to, and we talk back to you, and we make sure that we answer when you call. And this whole thing, I think, doesn't really. I think people as brands, in a lot of ways, are what we need to get back to. And the fact is, that's where I think the lack of engagement lies. The fact that people need a reason to leave the house and talk to other people.
Yeah.
And usually that's got to be around a commonality. And a lot of the commonalities are disappearing. So whether the commonality was to drink a pint of beer, or to go to the youth club to play table tennis, or to go to post a letter, these points of commonality are what we need to get back in. Or as they're saying, you could be looking at accommodation or living. But again, that's a point of commonality, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I like that. I've been thinking a lot about that. I know you're big into that. And I think that should be certainly a direction that people should go. I mean, if you're in a startup business, right, having an office where you can sleep and that's really nice and everything else is brilliant. I mean, it's
funny.
idea. And
What I find interesting is,
encourage more of it, right? I mean,
but when you look at the social, the world of social media, the big value players, a bit like yourself, are influencers, people who know on social media a lot of people. Wouldn't it be great if in the real world you had influencers, i.e., people who knew their local community, but people community, not this distanced, and there's nothing wrong with that, but not this distance thing. So all of a sudden, a certain brand will want to follow you because you've got X amount of thousand connections on LinkedIn or whatever it is. But it would be fascinating if you could create real communities in real high streets and have some influencers. So all of a sudden, brands are going, we're going to give Eddie 10,000, cans of whatever, Brewdog, because he's going to have a proper party where proper real people, and here's some space for him to do it. Yeah, so it's almost mirroring what's happening in the digital world back into what used to happen in real life, and that used to happen, didn't it? It used to happen. People used to socialize more and create communities more, and things like churches. Lapsed in terms of my particular religion, but the fact is, I was part of Roman Catholic and brought up with all these people who had these commonalities. And for me, it was never about the religion. It was more about the fact that there was a commonality, and it was creating communities. And I just think somehow or other we could be using the high streets to almost create online communities offline, and then the online communities could sell back to real groups. So I think it's a cycle that it's not about stopping the whole social media level of community. It's about actually creating real communities that benefit people, stop loneliness, create real places, real senses of being part of something. All of a sudden everything goes better, crime goes down, people are more engaged in terms of where they live, rather than assuming that the world's all bad or the world's all good, but the fact is, I think it's about getting out in the world and talking to people.
Yeah, well, I agree. I think that in many cases, people just think they're too busy and they think they're too important, and they're suffering from delusions of grandeur, and getting out. I mean, my dad, he's 85, right? And I've been hanging out with him. Yeah, he hardly even uses mobile phone. I live like a 10-minute cycle from him, right? He hardly uses his mobile phone. Yeah, and I've been teaching him Tai Chi in the mornings, like 3 mornings a week for an hour. He's 85. I kid you not. He's been going to the gym for like 3 years, pumping weights and stuff. And he talks to people and people need that engagement. Just think about like this present generation of say the 50-year-olds who are into social media now, and then they get to 60, they get to 70, they get to 80, right? They're never going to speak to anyone in the real world unless this problem is fixed. And like some old age pensioners, right, aren't so lucky. They don't talk to people because no one goes to speak to them, right? And it's like, and I think you can lose touch with people, whether you're on social media or you're not. But I think it's down to your attitude and how friendly you are and how much time you've got to ask people about their lives.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you're like, and I'm fairly similar. I'm quite good morning when I meet people and this, that, and the other. So I do make an effort. But a lot of people aren't. But the more people who do make an effort, the more likely when you say good morning to someone that you pass in the morning, the less likely to be shocked if it happens more regularly. So I think that sense of the one thing social media could actually do is create a benefit which would add value to the other benefits, would be to create communities in the real world. Rather than actually keeping it totally insular. So I think anything that actually does that, and like I say, my focus is very much around the high street, because I think there's spatial opportunities to do that. In the environment, spaces are opening up, and all right, they're opening up at the moment probably for the wrong reasons, i.e. companies have gone bust, and obviously jobs have been lost. But that does present opportunities if the circumstances can be made right in terms of rentals, because again, a lot of retailers are tied into pension funds, so it's not a great thing when retailers are going bust. And local authorities are having to demand more for parking and rates because of having everything cut in terms of austerity. So everyone's under pressure, and we all know there's potholes all over the bloody place because they can't afford to fill them, and it's not. So but I think when that starts to pan out, and obviously you've got Brexit.
I know you're massive on recycling, yeah? Like, I know you buy these amazing boots that are a bit like, they're made from like recycled tyres. Are you wearing them today?
And now I'm actually wearing, I'm showing actually, I'm wearing a pair of, these are, I've just moved the camera, these are East German actually, they're called...
Nice.
Anyway, I always wear these sort of shoes.
So when it comes to recycling, right, okay, it could be so simple. Like the government, could actually work with empty spaces in town, They could take recycled goods from the tips, that were deemed saleable, right? And then they could become a charitable organisation themselves, and create their own charity, right? But the whole point is that no one actually thinks about these things, and no one actually says, well, we can do this. Charities get much lower rates. I think they're zero rate value, aren't they? So in my mind, the high street should have more charity shops. I mean, you go to this little town in Devon where I just moved from, this little town called Bovey Tracy. They've got a little distillery in there. You wouldn't even know it's even there, right? Dartmoor Distillery, which is new. They've got 4 charity shops, right? One's called the Mare and Foal Sanctuary, right? I kid you not. The stuff I've bought in, I mean, literally, I bought this tripod, right? I kid you not, right? This is a £95 tripod, This, right, will last for 25 years longer than the one you buy on Amazon for a tenner, I bought this for £6, right? I'm not ashamed to say that, right? And I am sick and tired of people wasting money, right, when they don't need to, Yeah.
No, I think that I buy clothes from a few specific sources, but the fact is the clothes. I mean, not that I've got that much longer to live, but the clothes I buy will last me the rest of my life. But they're not cheap. But the fact is, I buy a couple of different brands, which I buy predominantly workwear, so it's stuff that lasts you for life. And I think this idea of buying once and buying well, as against the Primark, buy 300 t-shirts, wear them once and throw them away, and you've got massive problems. But I think the problem with the whole high street thing is obviously the way it's sort of valued in terms of finance in the UK. So there's this huge value put on rental values and property in the UK, and that's part of the problem, that all of a sudden when things like retail start to diminish, obviously there's a lot of people who've got their bets on the retail horse, and they're very reluctant to go from £300 a square foot down to £30 a square foot, or whatever the figures may be, because it's not as simple as just reducing rents. And likewise, there's a whole raft of local authority things like planning uses, health and safety, fire, whatever. There's lots of reasons why things can't just change like that. But I think with a fair wind and a good plan, potentially things could change, and you could have a much more social, community-based focus around where people live. But it is actually having a plan, and for more people to actually push towards that. And I think the danger is that it's about engaging younger people in that. And I think a lot of younger people I know are very engaged in a whole range of things, from politics to whatever. But I think it's creating these opportunities, as you're saying, trying to make it work.
Yeah. Well, I can't thank you enough for your time. It's been really, really interesting. And
went round and round a bit, didn't it? But
hey, it's all right. You know, it's all right. We got there in the end.
Thanks so much for listening. Please subscribe, and wherever you prefer, share with your friends. And if you enjoyed the show, drop us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen.